Hey there. Ready to dive deep?
Always.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Today, we're going to unpack some real wisdom from Naval Ravikant.
Sounds good.
You might know him as the Angelus founder.
Mm-hmm.
But this guy, he's kind of become like a modern-day philosopher, right?
Yeah.
Sharing all these thoughts on wealth and happiness.
Absolutely.
And we got excerpts from his blog, his tweets, podcast appearances. It's like a whole treasure chest.
It is.
So we're going to figure out, like, how to get rich without just getting lucky.
Right.
And why happiness is more like a skill you develop, not just something that falls in your lap.
And what's really interesting is Naval's own life story. Like, it's a part of his philosophy. He doesn't just talk the talk, he's walk the walk. He went from, as he says, poor and miserable to finding both wealth and happiness.
Okay, so let's back up a sec. Naval's story, it is pretty compelling.
Oh, yeah.
He talks about growing up in a single-parent immigrant household, finding comfort in libraries, working odd jobs from when he was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Not exactly a silver spoon start, huh?
Right. And that contrast between his early struggles and then, his success in Silicon Valley, that's really key.
Yeah.
Like, he's saying, look, if I can create wealth coming from where I did, you can too. But it's not about just like copying his exact journey. It's about like getting the principles behind it,
So it's less about following in his exact footsteps and more about like adopting the right mindset, that wealth building is a skill set you can learn.
Yes.
Okay.
Naval really believes that anyone can learn these skills if they're willing to put in the work.
Okay, so that kind of takes us to his famous how to get rich tweet storm, right? It's like his blueprint for wealth creation. It's all condensed down, bite-sized pieces.
And it's fascinating how he just like lays it out, breaks it down into these key principles like owning equity, playing these long-term games, and finding leverage. He even says, you're not going to get rich renting out your time.
Ooh.
Which is pretty bold.
Hold on, renting out your time. So he's saying that like trading hours for dollars, that classic 9-to-5 grind, it's not the way to get rich.
Exactly. He's challenging that whole traditional model of working.
Okay.
He wants you to think bigger.
Yeah.
To build assets that make money even when you're not working.
So it's like he's saying work smarter, not harder. But how do you actually do that?
Well, that's where this idea of specific knowledge comes in.
Specific knowledge.
Yeah. Naval says it's not just about knowing a bunch of random stuff. It's about that unique combination of your skills and passions and experiences, what you've been through. It's what makes you you. It's what makes you valuable,
So you're saying we all have this specific knowledge, but we got to figure out what it is. Like, how do you actually identify that? It sounds kind of like abstract.
He gives some like really good examples. Like, think about Joe Rogan.
Okay. Yeah.
He loves MMA. He loves comedy, loves those deep conversations.
Right.
That combo, that's his specific knowledge.
Yeah.
He found a way to blend those passions and create something really unique.
Okay.
Something valuable. And that's what makes him so irreplaceable. You can't just swap Joe Rogan out.
Makes sense. But some folks might be thinking, well, Joe Rogan, he's a celebrity, This specific knowledge thing, it's not for regular people. What do you say to that?
Well, that's where Naval's point about Bill Watterson comes in.
Okay.
Remember Calvin and Hobbes?
Oh, of course. Classic.
Watterson, he revolutionized the comic strip, poured his heart and soul into it. He wasn't chasing fame or money or anything. He was driven by his passion, his unique way of seeing the world.
Yeah.
And it connected with millions,
Okay, so it's not about being famous. It's about, like, being authentically you.
Exactly. And that authenticity mixed with hard work and that long-term vision, it leads to extraordinary things.
Speaking of long-term vision, Naval is a big believer in the power of compound interest, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Not just with money, but like with relationships, with your reputation.
Yeah, he sees compound interest as this like fundamental principle of growth. Applies to almost every area of life. He even tells the story about another investor, Elad Gil.
Okay.
And how like Elad's generosity, how it just like compounded over time, building trust and opening up these crazy opportunities.
So it's like the more you give, the more you get back, but not in a transactional way.
Yeah.
More like this ripple effect of like goodwill and good vibes.
Yeah, exactly. It's about like looking at relationships with that long-term view, building real connections, focusing on adding value to other people's lives.
Okay, I get that. But this whole long game, it requires patience, right? Especially in today's world. Everyone wants everything right now.
Yeah.
So how do you stay patient?
That's where judgment comes in.
Okay.
Naval really believes that good judgment is essential for navigating the long game.
Makes sense.
It's about assessing situations, making informed decisions, and understanding like the long-term consequences of what you do.
So good judgment. It's not about being like book smart or anything.
Not
It's
right.
about like understanding the bigger picture, seeing those potential pitfalls and opportunities that other people miss.
It is.
Yeah.
He even says that in this age of leverage, where like one good decision can have a massive impact, judgment becomes even more critical.
Yeah,
It's about making the right call when it really counts.
totally. Okay, so we've talked about specific knowledge, this whole power of leverage, and making those high-impact decisions.
Hmm.
But something that really struck me in all this material is how Naval, he doesn't just talk about wealth, he talks about happiness too.
That's what makes him so unique, right?
Yeah.
He sees both wealth and happiness as skills to be developed, not just things that happen to you by chance. And he's like really open about his own like struggles with happiness. He even rated himself a 2 out of 10 earlier in life.
A 2?
Yeah.
Wow. So even someone as successful as Naval, he had to work at finding happiness.
He did. And now he says he's a 9 out of 10.
Wow, so I guess it really is a skill, something you got to actively develop.
He's basically saying you're not like stuck at a certain level of happiness. You can actually increase it
Okay.
by applying the right ideas and practices.
But where do you even begin?
Right.
If happiness is a skill, what are the steps to get better at it?
Well, Naval has this really interesting idea that true happiness comes from acceptance, not from chasing those like external goals all the time.
Okay.
It's about finding contentment in the moment
Yeah.
rather than always striving for what's next, what's bigger, better.
Acceptance. That sounds a bit, I don't know, passive, like giving up almost.
No, not at all. He's not saying you shouldn't have goals or dreams,
Okay.
but rather you shouldn't tie your happiness to achieving them.
I see.
He actually suggests this framework of 3 choices.
3 choices. Okay, tell me more.
He says that in any situation, you can choose to change it, you can choose to accept it, or you can choose to leave it.
Okay.
And when it comes to happiness, he thinks acceptance is often the key.
So it's about like choosing your battles. If you can change something, great, go for it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can't, maybe it's better to just accept it and move on.
Right. It's about focusing your energy on what you can control instead of letting yourself get all wrapped up in the things you can't.
Okay, acceptance. Got it. But what about like actions, concrete stuff you can do? Does Naval have any practical tips for actually boosting your happiness?
He does. He advocates for things like meditation, exercise,
Okay.
healthy diet, and even cold shower.
Cold showers, you're kidding. That doesn't exactly scream happy to me.
Well, he's not saying it's always going to be fun, but he thinks that cold showers, they build this mental resilience, this willpower.
Oh, interesting.
And he like really explains the why behind each practice. So meditation for calming the mind, exercise for boosting your mood, healthy diet for energy. He's got like a whole toolkit.
So it's not just random advice. There's this scientific and philosophical like basis for each one.
Exactly. He's not just like, do this because I said so.
Right.
He's actually giving you the reasoning so you understand how it works and why it matters.
It's like he's empowering you to be your own like happiness scientist.
Mm-hmm.
Experiment with different techniques and find what works for you.
Absolutely. He's all about taking control of your own happiness, creating a life that feels, truly joyful and authentic to you.
All this talk about happiness, it reminds me of something else Naval really emphasizes. Living by your values.
Yeah, for sure.
He talks about honesty, long-term thinking, surrounding yourself with good people, like-minded people.
These aren't just like generic values to him. These are like core principles. He truly believes that integrity, depth of thought, and real connection are essential for a fulfilling life.
So it's like finding your tribe, those people who get you, who support you, and building a life that reflects what you truly care about. But that takes time and effort to figure that out, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's not like a quick fix.
It's a journey. He even compares personal growth to compound interest.
What?
Small, consistent efforts over time, they lead to big results.
Like planting a seed, nurturing it patiently, and watching it grow into something stronger, something bigger.
Exactly.
But all this talk about patience, it brings up a question for me. How do you stay patient in a world that just pushes you towards instant gratification all the time?
That's where self-discipline comes in.
Okay.
Naval talks about it as like a bridge to a new self-image. It's about making the choice to stick with something, even when it's hard,
Yeah.
even when you don't see the results immediately.
So it's like saying, okay, I'm not there yet, but I'm working on it. You're building that discipline muscle step by step.
Yeah, exactly. And that discipline helps you stay committed to your goals, whether it's building wealth, finding happiness, or whatever you're striving for.
But let's be real, discipline, it's tough. There are always distractions, temptations, those days when you just don't feel like putting in the work.
Naval has a really cool perspective on this.
Okay.
He talks about the mind as this tool, this powerful tool
Mm-hmm.
that can either work for you or against you.
So like our mind can be our best friend or our worst enemy.
Right. And he believes that by training your mind through things like meditation,
Okay.
you can actually gain more control over your thoughts or emotions.
Meditation. Okay, I'll admit it. I used to think that was just for like monks or something. You're saying it's a practical tool for everyday life.
He's not saying you got to become a monk, but he thinks it's good to incorporate those mindfulness practices into your daily routine. He even talks about his own early struggles with meditation. It didn't really help him that much at first.
So even Naval had to work at it.
Yeah.
It's kind of reassuring to know that he's not just like naturally zen.
Right.
He's not like naturally disciplined.
It goes back to his belief that anyone can develop these skills if they just put in the effort.
Yeah.
He sees the mind as a muscle. It needs to be exercised, strengthened, just like any other muscle in your body.
I see the connection. So by training your mind, you build this mental toughness, this resilience
Yes,
to stay focused, resist temptations, and stick with the plan even when it gets tough.
exactly. It's about developing that inner strength to handle whatever life throws at you.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. Specific knowledge, compound interest, the power of the mind. But there's this one part of Naval's philosophy that I find super intriguing.
Yeah.
It's his emphasis on choosing happiness.
It is a powerful idea. Yeah. He really believes that happiness is not something you just stumble upon or you wait for it to happen. It's a choice you make.
Wait, so you mean like literally waking up and saying, today I choose to be happy?
It's more about cultivating that mindset, the habits that actually lead to happiness.
Okay.
He's not like denying the fact that there are challenges and difficult emotions.
Yeah.
He's saying you have more control over your happiness than you might think.
So it's about like focusing on the positive, practicing gratitude, reframing those negative thoughts.
Yeah, it's about choosing to approach life with a positive attitude, even when things are rough.
Mm-hmm.
And recognizing that happiness, it's an ongoing process, not a destination.
That makes sense. You're not always going to feel happy, but you can like set yourself up for happiness.
Exactly. And a big part of that, as Naval says, is surrounding yourself with the right people. He talks about finding your tribe,
Your tribe.
the people who share your values,
Yeah.
lift you up, inspire you.
So find your people, build a supportive community. He's saying the people you spend time with, they really matter.
They do. He thinks they have a massive impact on your mindset,
Yeah.
your beliefs,
Uh-huh.
and ultimately your happiness. He even talks about finding work that feels like play.
Ooh, work that feels like play, that's the dream.
Pursuing those passions, creating something you're really proud of.
So it's aligning your work with your values, finding a career that feels meaningful, fulfilling.
He's basically saying work doesn't have to be a soul-crushing grind. It can be a source of joy,
Yeah.
creativity,
Mm-hmm.
and even wealth if you find that true calling and create something truly valuable.
You know, I think one of the most appealing things about Naval's philosophy is that he brings all these ideas together, right? From meditation to entrepreneurship into this coherent worldview.
It is fascinating how he connects these seemingly like completely different concepts, weaving them into this like practical guide for living a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
It's like he's saying, life is short, time is precious, and you have the power to make it amazing.
It's a message of empowerment and possibility. He's reminding us that we have way more control over our lives than we think.
Mm-hmm.
And that by developing the right mindset and skills,
Yeah.
we can create a life that really reflects what we care about, our aspirations.
Okay, so we talked about honesty, patience, the power of the mind, choosing happiness, finding your tribe, and doing work that feels like play.
Right.
But as we move on to the final part of this deep dive, I think it's worth thinking about this one thing Naval said. It seems a little contradictory at first, but he says, desire is suffering. What do you think he means by that?
It is a provocative statement, and I think it kind of goes to the heart of like Buddhist philosophy. you know?
Well,
Naval's pointing out that, like, while desire, yeah, it can be this powerful motivator. It can also be a huge source of frustration, unhappiness even.
So it's not that desire itself is bad, but that we can get so caught up in always wanting more, never being satisfied with what we have.
Exactly. It's like that whole grass is always greener thing, you know?
Classic.
We hit one goal, then we just set our sights on the next one. Never stopping to just, like, appreciate what's right there in front of us.
And that's where the suffering comes in. Because there's always going to be something else to want, another mountain to climb.
He's suggesting that, like, real happiness, it doesn't come from chasing desires.
Okay.
It comes from finding contentment, being grateful for what you already have.
Shifting that focus from wanting to appreciating.
Yeah.
I can see how that connects to his idea of acceptance.
Totally.
It's about acknowledging that we can't control everything, that life, it has both joy and sorrow.
Right.
And finding peace in the middle of it all.
He's not saying you should just abandon your goals or anything.
Yeah.
It's more about understanding that everything changes and finding that inner peace no matter what's happening around you.
That's a big idea. But also really challenging, right?
Yeah.
How do we train ourselves to let go of that constant striving, that need to achieve?
Well, this is where Naval's practical stuff comes in.
Okay.
He's big on, like, meditation and mindfulness. Things that can help us become more aware of our thoughts or feelings.
So it's about recognizing those desires when they pop up, but not letting them, like, take over.
Exactly.
Learning to observe them without judgment and just, like, gently shift our attention back to the present moment.
Right. And he also talks about gratitude. Like, really noticing and appreciating all the good stuff in our lives, even the small things.
Gratitude, that comes up a lot in, like, happiness research too, doesn't it?
It does.
It's like you're training your brain to zero in on the positive, which can have a huge impact on how you feel overall.
Absolutely. And he also emphasizes, like, living in line with your values, making choices that show what's important to you, what you really care about.
Okay.
It's about creating a life that feels real, meaningful, not just chasing, approval from others or material stuff.
Defining success on your own terms, not by what society says, but by what matters to you deep down.
Exactly. And that sense of purpose, of meaning, that's what can bring real deep satisfaction.
Yeah. So as we move towards wrapping up this deep dive into Naval's thinking, what are some key takeaways for our listeners? What can they do, like, starting today to apply these ideas?
I think the biggest one is that, like, we have more control over our happiness than we think. It's not about waiting for things to change. It's about building those habits, that mindset that leads to a better life.
So it's not about luck. It's not about fate. It's about, like, taking charge, right?
It is.
Making choices and putting in the work to create the life you want.
Exactly. It's recognizing that we have the power. We can shape our thoughts, our actions.
And ultimately, our experience of life.
And it's about finding that balance, right? Between going after your goals and appreciating what's happening right now. Learning to embrace the whole journey with the ups and the downs. Finding joy in the simple things.
He's reminding us that, like, life is a gift.
Yeah.
It's up to us to make the most of it.
Well said. So that's it, a deep dive into the mind of Naval Ravikant. We covered a lot. From getting rich to hacking happiness, even accepting death. But his message, it's really about hope, about possibility. It's about seeing the potential we all have to create a life that feels successful and joyful, a life that's truly meaningful and truly ours.
And on that note, we'll leave you with one last thought from Naval. He says, the most important trick to be happy is to realize that happiness is a choice that you make and a skill that you develop. So go out there, choose happiness, practice happiness, and build a life that you love.
It's a pretty deep statement, I think it kind of gets at this Buddhist idea. Like, desire can push you forward. But it can also be this source of, like, constant frustration and happiness.
So it's not that wanting things is bad. It's more that we get stuck in this loop of always wanting more.
Right.
Never really feeling satisfied.
Exactly. It's that old saying, the grass is always greener.
Oh, yeah.
We reach one goal, and then boom, we're already looking at the next one.
Yeah.
Never really taking the time to enjoy what we have right now.
And that's where the suffering comes in.
Yeah.
Because there's always going to be something else we want, another mountain to climb.
He's saying that real happiness, it doesn't come from just chasing after all these desires.
Oh.
It comes from being content, from appreciating what you already have.
shifting from wanting to appreciating.
Yeah,
I see how that kind of ties back to his idea of acceptance.
definitely.
It's about like realizing we don't control everything.
Right.
Life throws good stuff and bad stuff at you, and it's about finding peace with all of it.
He's not saying we should just give up on our goals, you know?
Right, right.
It's more about recognizing that everything's always changing and finding that inner peace no matter what's happening out there.
That's a powerful idea, but tough to put into practice. How do you like actually train yourself to let go of that constant striving,
Yeah.
that need to always be achieving?
Well, I think this is where some of Naval's practical advice comes in, like meditation, mindfulness, practices that can help you, just become more aware of your thoughts, your feelings.
So it's about noticing those desires when they pop up,
Yeah.
but not letting them run the show.
Right.
Learning to just like observe them without judgment and just like gently bring your attention back to the present moment.
Exactly. He also talks a lot about gratitude, really noticing and appreciating the good things, no matter how small.
Gratitude, yeah, that's huge in all the research on happiness too. It's like training your brain to focus on the good stuff,
It is.
which can make a big difference in how you feel overall.
It does. And he really emphasizes living by your values, making choices that are in line with what's really important to you.
Okay.
Not just going after external validation or things, possessions. It's about building a life that feels real and meaningful.
So defining success on your own terms, not by like society's standards,
Yeah,
but what really matters to you.
exactly. And that sense of purpose, of meaning, that's something that can bring a real deep kind of satisfaction.
Yeah, yeah. So as we wrap up this whole deep dive into Naval's world, what are some key takeaways for our listeners? What can they like start doing today to apply these ideas?
I think the biggest takeaway is that we have way more control over our happiness than we tend to think. It's not about waiting for things to get better. It's about creating those habits, those ways of thinking that lead to a more fulfilling life.
So it's not about luck, not about fate. It's about like taking charge, making choices, putting in the work to build the life you want.
Yes, exactly. It's about realizing we have the power to shape our thoughts, our actions, and ultimately how we experience life.
And it's about finding that balance, right, between striving for what you want and appreciating what you already have.
Yeah.
Learning to embrace the whole journey, with all the ups and downs, finding joy in the little things.
He's reminding us that life is a gift, and it's our job to make the most of it.
Well said. So there you have it, a deep dive into the mind of Naval Ravikant. We talked about a lot, from building wealth to finding happiness, even dealing with the idea of death. But his message, it's ultimately a message of hope, of possibility. It's about recognizing that we all have the potential to create a life that feels both successful and joyful, a life that's truly meaningful and authentically our own. That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.